So in my last video, I mentioned that we'll jump into the technical side of UI UX, and you can watch that video by clicking on something here. So the first thing we're going to do is clarify on terminology. This is something that I talk about quite often with my peers, because right now there isn't a universal governing body who is dictating all these, and there likely won't ever be one. So just to give you an example, if we look at some well-known design systems like BBC Gel, they call their styles foundation, and the library of components patterns. Gov.uk has gone with styles and components. They've also got patterns, which are best practice design solutions made of components. So you can see that even at the top level, there's a discrepancy between organizations. And as we go down, things get more and more complicated. So I've come up with a list of terminologies, and you can start implementing these into your vocabulary or your own team and organization so that you can ensure everyone's on the same page when they're referring to something. Now, because we're primarily using Figma within the industry, the terminologies are Figma led, meaning that if Figma is using a terminology for something specific, I will be following that first. So let's start with the most basic, which are some UI attributes first. Styles are individual visual qualities that is applied to everything on the page. For example, colors, typography, and effects. And from styles, we've got local styles. So local style is a Figma terminology, and local styles are predefined styles that you can reuse within the same local file. This might be a specific color range that is specific to a niche project that you're working on. And then the level above that, we've got global styles. So similar to local styles, they're predefined styles, but they can be used widely across the whole organization. These usually will come from the design system or a design library. So for example, if we look at IKEA's colors, their main colors are blue and yellow. They should technically be global styles that is distributed across to everyone within the organization. And foundations are the entire collection of global styles. So for example, BBC Gel's foundation has a whole bunch of global styles like colors and typography that really represents their brand. Okay, just to add, there is a new feature in Figma called variables, and variables will likely replace styles in the near future. But for the time being, variables are still in open beta. So for now, we're just gonna stick to styles. Now let's take a look at UI objects. Elements refer to any objects on a page. Everything on a page is an element. So think of it like the term fruit. You got apples, pears, bananas, oranges. All of them are different, but they're all fruits. And if that's still confusing, I'll give a better example later on. Atoms are UI elements that can't be broken down any further. So a button, for example, is an atom. Molecules are a collection of atoms that make up a UI element. So a card model, for example, is a collection of atoms combined together. Some of you might recognize these two terminologies from Brad Frost's atomic design structure. And these are the only two terminologies I've taken from there, because I feel anything above that are a little bit blurry in terms of their definition. Next, we got patterns. Patterns are a collection of molecules that make up a UI element. So for example, the sports headline container, that is made up of card modules, which are individual molecules, and two text fields at the top. Next, we're going to look at components. So component is actually a Figma terminology. So components are elements that can be reused across your design. So a component can be any element. It can be an atom, a molecule, a pattern, whatever you make it. And you can structure components in two ways. So again, similar to styles, you've got local components, which are components that are stored locally and can only be used in the same local file. Then you've got global components. So these are components that are inside a library, which is shared across the whole team and organization. Now, if you're a beginner and you're not familiar with Figma just yet, some of these might not make complete sense to you. As we go through some of these exercises later on, I'll be referring back to these terminologies whenever I want to identify something on a page. And just to give you an example of these terminologies in use, I've taken a page from British Airways website, interpreted these in my own terminologies. So everything on a page are elements. So whether it's the header at the top, the navigation bar underneath, or the search function in the middle. Then you've got the header, which to me would be a global component. That is a molecule, and so would the navigation below. And the reason why they are global components is because they appear on every single page, and any page they design would have a header and a navigation, unless there are some specific scenarios where they are not needed. Now, the flight search, that could be a global or it might be a local component, because this might be the only page that this specific component shows up. And this would be a pattern because it's made up of multiple molecules and some atoms. At the top we have 5 radio buttons. These radio buttons should be global components and they are atoms. And beneath those we have drop downs and text fields, which should be global components that are molecules, and then a find flights button, which should be a global component and it is an atom. Okay, so those are the terminologies that I will be using whenever I'm referring to something on this channel. And as I said before, these are terminologies that you can start implementing in your design vocabulary so that whenever you're talking about something, you are precise and clear with what you're referring to. Okay, on to the next lesson, which I will link here.